AWT, the Transformation Training Center. We are so excited to have our panelists here today, working very closely for several months now with SME and bringing you a pathway to engineering, understanding what careers are available and what you can do now, who you can connect with and ask questions of. We're just really excited to have you here. And I would like to introduce Sharonda Carr. We've been working really closely together, I think, since about January. And SME has some great resources for individuals of any age, so I think she'll share with you a little bit about that as well.
Thank you, Teresa. Sharonda Carr here with SME. I am the Vice President of Membership with SME. Just want to first say a heartfelt thank you, Teresa, to you and AWT for partnering with SME and for having us here today along with this beautiful panel. I want to talk a little bit about who SME is. We are a national trade organization, professional organization. We have a primary focus on advancing manufacturing technology and increasing and enhancing the workforce pipeline, our talent pipeline in manufacturing. And we do that in a number of ways by partnering with organizations like AWT and local communities to enhance our manufacturing ecosystem across the U.S. We also have representation in 15 other countries. Part of our initiative, we have a very deep opportunity to foster our relationships in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion today. And earlier, as we looked at so many of the young students in the STEM-related field today, I was inspired myself just to hear and see the young ladies present themselves, their leadership skills, their speaking skills, just learning about manufacturing processes and being able to share that knowledge with others. It is inspiring. So today we are going to have this panel talk about career and STEM-related pathways in manufacturing. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Jane Christyson, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Girl Scouts, the Ohio Eastern Chapter.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And you might wonder what I'm doing here. A lot of people think of Girl Scouts as cookies, crafts, and camping, and we do all those things, and we love all those things. But one of the 4 pillars that is part of our organization, we have 4 pillars that all of our bachelor work programs fall under, and that's life skills, entrepreneurship, the outdoors, and STEM. That's our 4th pillar. We're currently building an 8,000 square foot STEM Center of Excellence, and the overarching theme of that building will be making the world a better place, because that's what Girl Scouts do, through nature-inspired design. So all throughout the building we'll be working with our 18,000 Girl Scouts that we have in this area, as well as we're going to invite boys and girls during the school year, during the week, to take field trips in that building as well, to have the sort of wow experiences in STEM. So I'm really interested in hearing the personal stories of these women and sharing those with our Girl Scouts, because we know women are so underrepresented in STEM fields, and it's so important for us to all take a part in creating that spark and that interest, and bringing more girls and women to the table for manufacturing. So I have a bunch of questions, and I might ask, I'm going to ask the first one to everybody, so you can give a little bit about your background and what really sparked your interest in getting into a STEM field. And then I'll be asking some other questions randomly, so some of you can have a little bit of information about different topics. But the first one, if you could go down and talk a little bit about what inspired you to pursue a career in manufacturing, and a little bit about what your background was, and if you could remember that moment where you said, well, that's really where I want to go and where I want to be.
Hi, so I'm Nicole, Graf. I work at Lincoln Electric Additive Solutions, and I am an additive project engineer. So I do a lot of large-scale printing of massive parts out of metal using our welders on ABB robot arms. And I remember why I wanted to get into engineering. I was a very well-rounded student. I didn't know what I wanted to do in of the flus came out, and my dad and I both got it. And so we were forced to hang out in the basement, and my dad told me, I'm the dad, so I choose what we watch, and we watched Battlestar Galactica. And so for his birthday that year, I decided to make a model of one of the robot bad guys, and I worked really hard on it, and at the end of it, I had a really cool model that did nothing. And I was like, well, this is boring. I want to make robots. So then I started looking up a bunch of different engineering and found AWT, robobots, and I participated in that when I was in high school at Menor, and then began looking at a bunch of other, research in colleges, research in different programs, and then my mother is also an engineer, so just asking for her advice, connecting with other engineers in the community, and the rest is history.
It's a great story.
Hi, so my name is Jamesa Stokes, and I am a materials research engineer at NASA's Glenn Research Center in Cleveland. Fun fact, my natural talent is art. So when I first went to college, I actually started college as a studio art major. But growing up, I always really liked science and math, also especially math. And so once I got into college, I switched my major to pre-architecture and then finally physics. And then once I switched my major to physics, that's when I just started taking internships to figure out what I liked and what I potentially wanted to do for a career. And it wasn't until I came to Cleveland for the first time, as I was graduating with my bachelor's degree. I came to Glenn, this was now 10 years ago, and I had a summer internship working on materials, and specifically high temperature materials. And I really enjoyed that experience, and that's what led me into going overseas, doing research in Germany, also for materials for flight vehicles, and what got me into doing my PhD also in material science and engineering. So really it was trying different things, learning new skills, and of course coming to Cleveland that got me to where I am now.
I'll use this one, you can pass that one back. Is this one on? It is. It's actually hearing you say that you went in as a studio art major and came out as a physics major is like the most fascinating journey, but it's not uncommon, right? We at AWT, we've been trying to find the right partner to explore the A in STEM, or STEAM I should say, yeah, that's and which is art. And so I think we'll be working hopefully with one of with the Fine Arts Association around here to come up with something so that young people can explore the tie-in. If you're good with your hands and you have this creative vision, you may be very good at manufacturing as well. So my name is Alyson Scott. I'm president of Fredon Corporation and president of the board here at AWT. And my journey started, my father started the business in 1969. So it was always part of my life, but I never really thought I would pursue a career in it. I wanted to become a teacher. I was going to be a 7 through 12 English teacher. Halfway through my junior year, I decided to switch from education and became communications major. So English communications is what I ended up with my bachelor's in. But after a year, I moved to Seattle for a year and then returned home. And I said, Dad, I don't want you to create a job for me, but could I work, or can you help me find a job or whatever? And of course he said, absolutely. And in absolute Roger style, he made sure that I had something that was at Fredon and was in my interest of doing public relations, and that's kind of how I started there. I think it's very interesting to see myself now being kind of in both worlds of manufacturing and education, doing all of the events with the robots and with Jamesa and all of these things. And at Fredon, we used to host tours, from kindergarten age up, and it really allows me to keep that passion of teaching and marry it with the amazing world of manufacturing. I can't imagine myself anywhere else. I mean, we have 86 employees, just under $20 million in sales. I get to work with my dad every day, even though he's retired. He comes in every day. And my brother, my nephew, and my niece also work in the business, and my son is working in the summer, this summer, working assembly, inspection, wherever it's needed. So it's a great opportunity, and I'm very, very lucky.
So, Alyson, just to follow up a little bit.
Yes.
To follow up a little bit on what you just said, you remember to pick this up. Could you talk about what a typical day looks like for you? Or I know there's no such
That's a
thing.
terrible one for me. Well, and it's funny because I remember when I became president, there is a consultant that worked with strategic planning, and he works with family businesses and that kind of thing, and succession planning. And I asked him one day, what does a president do? I mean, I know what it's like when you have a job like public relations or accounting or whatever. What does a president do? And he said, a president's job is to never do anything consistently because you need to be out tackling anything that's coming your way. So there shouldn't be any task that you have to do on a daily basis or whatever, because your approach is more thinking globally and about all of the employees. And I mean, throughout the day, people come into my office for different things. We have meetings on the fly. I have no door in my office, so people just come in. We have a very open door policy. But no, I love working with the people. We were establishing goals and doing management review meetings and such last week. The week before that, I was covering for our office manager who was on vacation, and I happened to, back a million years ago, I subbed in for her when she was on maternity leave, so I pulled out all those old, work instructions and everything and updated them a little bit. So I was doing payroll and doing checks and things like that. So I mean, that's kind of fun to actually have a little task to do every day. So yeah, it's a little bit different every day.
We have a question of what is STEM, to make a word cloud for any of you who can participate in that, so we can collect those responses. So thanks. For Jamesa, you sound like you've had a very varied career. So can you talk about a exciting project that you worked on that really captured your imagination and your attention, and what that looked like for you?
Yeah, so actually, I'll talk about my very first NASA internship, and that was at Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. And my mentor for that particular internship, he takes the initiative where he wants to pick students who don't have a lot of experience, but have promising grades, but just need a chance to learn a new skill and figure out what they want to do. So for this particular internship, I was working on instrumentation that would go on balloon flight, and I would be soldering wires to hook up different instrumentation to run tests, and also had to design this bell jar so we could test them at cryogenic temperatures with liquid nitrogen. So I had to learn how to properly use liquid nitrogen and be safe about doing it. Had to learn code for the first time, had to learn LabVIEW. So that particular project, I think that's honestly, even though, I love material science, that's what I do, but I feel like that project really set me on a good path of gaining all these varied skills in one place that I still use to this day. So, yeah.
That's great. It's a wonderful story. Talks about, being inspired and also learning sort of life skills that you can bring forward. Such an important thing to experience. And so Nicole, would you like to talk a little bit about what subjects you enjoyed? You told me a little story about your mom and some of the things you did with AWT, but in school, what things did you really gravitate towards that you think now really help you in your career?
So going back, I always loved math and science, but I loved history and English just as much. Before I graduated high school, I was actually already a published poet, but I definitely gravitated more towards the hard sciences and hard mathematics when I decided I wanted wanted to be an engineer. So moving on to my undergraduate years, I definitely revolved around the classes that had a lot to do with robots. I really liked the hands-on classes, so we had a couple of design classes, you know, and then a bunch of like classes on the science and math on how things move, which are a little bit more advanced. And so it's really just thinking about where you can take your extracurriculars, and I know a lot of high schools are starting to allow students to have more options in the classes that they take. So it's just really exploring what gets you excited, because I know that we're talking about school, but if you go to work every day and it feels like you're at work, that's not fun. And so if you go to school every day and it feels like work instead of something exciting, then I think that tells you a lot about what gets you excited. And so when I went on for my PhD, you get even more freedom in what classes that you take. So I was able to really focus on what made me excited and explore the world of robots more, and then able to apply those areas in my research and see what made me excited to go to Case Western or, you know, just work every day. And it's just focusing on being honest with yourself on if this is boring, maybe you should look at other classes, and then just finding out what classes are out there. So talking to different counselors and stuff like that, but yeah, I was a big math girl.
Math, I mean, it's one of those subjects that may be intimidating to some women and girls, and so it's important for them to see somebody like you who really took it and enjoyed it and moved it forward, so that's a great story to tell. So Jamesa, you talked a little bit about your early inspirations and some of the things you learned early on in your career that you still use now, but are there things that you've been learning lately that you feel are really important to your job that you're doing now, and maybe the job that you want in the future?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I was talking to Nicole right before the event started about, like, I had a meeting today. I said, you know, I have a hard cutoff at 30 minutes. I'm going to be traveling. So they asked me, could I take a meeting while I'm going to be on international travel? And I'm like, no. So learning how to say no has been super helpful, especially because, you know, we're all busy professionals. I have a lot of responsibilities, but, you know, if I've made the time to arrange things so while I'm gone, everything is good, and letting people know ahead of time, then when there's demands on you, it's okay to say, no, I don't have the bandwidth for X, Y, Z. However, I will return to this at an eventual point. Because just going back to what Nicole said, you know, we all want to do the fun things. We all want to be as helpful as we can in every situation, but it's no good if you're frustrated or if you're burned out yourself. So I would say definitely learning how to say no has been super helpful for me.
And just a little follow-up for you. Do you feel like when you're in your job and you look at the landscape and your colleagues that men sort of get permission more to say no than the women that you work with?
Well, I think I've been very fortunate in the division and the organization that I'm at Glenn, where I'm actually surrounded by a bunch of women who also have their PhDs and are also very strong personalities who also have no problem saying no to things. But also, I feel like there's enough people around who are supportive, where if you feel backed into a corner, or I actually had a recent situation with this, where another colleague fell back into a corner, even felt bullied, and, you know, we had to handle that situation. But so I feel like there's enough supportive people around and enough strong-willed people around that we figure it out.
That's great, thanks for your honesty. And we're going to talk a little about challenges and rewards, and this one's for you, Alyson. Can you describe what you feel was like your biggest challenge that you faced in your career, and what steps did you take to overcome that?
Gosh, that's a hard one. I think one of the most challenging things I think that I've dealt with in the past, more so in the past when I was a little bit more unsure in my leadership and career, when I was dealing with customers and on big projects, and customer, and he was something else. He was a bully for sure, and I won't say his name, but I remember it absolutely to this day. And I think it was probably 20 years ago. But he was so demanding, and he really, what he wanted to do was kind of separate me from my team and get me to agree to do whatever it was against my team. Like, he figured he could intimidate me, and I would eventually cave and say, sure, we can, do that volume or do that discount or whatever the case was at the time. And for me, I had to stand up and say, no, whatever my team said, that's what it is. I'm not going to give you different information than my team did, because ultimately they're the ones that have to support whatever I'm making decisions and talking about things that they're going to have to end up assisting with, and there's no way I can say something against what they say. He didn't like that answer, of course, but he lived with it, and eventually he was okay when we signed the contract. So.
But a little bit of follow-up on that. There's a lot of conversation around, a lot of articles written about imposter syndrome. And a lot of times when I talk to young women, they talk about how they're feeling that, they've somehow been put in this position where they don't deserve to be. So can you talk a little bit about that, about how you felt and maybe how you built skills around so you didn't feel like that anymore?
Oh, sure. I think there's times, even now, I feel like, I don't know why I'm up here at a panel with PhDs. I don't know. Like, I didn't really like that. But I think there's always a little bit of that self-doubt. But I think you really need to look at your achievements, even if they're small ones, or, you did finally got that project that you've been putting off, and it actually takes less time than you thought it would. Look at those successes and understand that each success and each failure teach you something, and you're a stronger, more well-rounded person or worker or professional or what have you. You have to realize that you are able to achieve these things, and you are able to do the work, and you are someone that people can talk to or look up to or be the colleague that helps out. I think recognizing those is what eventually increases your self-esteem and your inner reflection of yourself and your skill set.
Thank you. And Jamesa, what do you think that you find most rewarding about working in manufacturing? What about the process really makes you excited and makes you want to continue in that field?
So the materials I primarily work on, a lot of my major projects are related to materials that go on commercial airplane engines. It's what I worked on for my thesis, and that made me feel really accomplished because I was working on something that's going to benefit something that I love to do, which is fly and travel. So working on materials that can make commercial airplane engines more fuel efficient and make them greener in the future, I think that really inspired me.
Wonderful. Nicole, what advice would you give girls that are interested in STEM? You talked a lot about your early inspiration, and how would you suggest to them they find that?
Yeah, so I think I have two biggest pieces of advice. One is don't be afraid to go for it. Like, if someone says, this isn't for girls and stuff, I've had many guys tell me that I shouldn't be an engineer because I'm a girl, or why am I here, or that there's no way I graduated, summa cum laude because I was blonde at the time. So just know that you can do anything, and just adding on to the imposter syndrome, because I feel like this ties in a lot with not being afraid to move on, is after I graduated with my PhD and started my job at Lincoln, I was scared. I felt like I needed to have all of the answers for everything, especially with being a girl, especially with being a PhD. And so I would ask my colleagues, like, oh, is this right? Is this right? Is this how I should handle this? But nobody has a right answer or a wrong answer. I mean, sometimes in retrospect, you find out what you did was not the right answer. But I think it really helps me with respect to the imposter syndrome, and then also with finding out where I belong in my career and within engineering is nobody knows anything. Everyone's just making it up, and even if someone looks like the most confident person in the room, sometimes you gotta pretend to be the most confident person in the room. So just keep on being true to yourself, keep following what gets you excited, and just remember that everyone is probably screaming internally.
Alyson, what would you suggest if a girl was in high school? What kinds of things would you tell her to start doing right now?
I think that I would encourage young ladies and young men to really take advantage of opportunities for internships or job shadows, or a club that works in a related field to something that could turn into a career. Because you don't want to find out at the end of 4 years or 2 years or even going into a job right out of high school that you really just don't like this. And the more you can expose yourself to those careers early on, you absolutely have a chance to try things on and to see, am I good at this? Do I enjoy this? Am I screaming inside because I hate this so much? Or, or am I screaming inside because I'm so excited about this opportunity and I don't know if I'm good enough to do it? I think now we have so many opportunities that even online you can, take classes and seminars and watch things, and there's really a lot of resources available to young women and young men nowadays to do this career exploration early on. So I would definitely encourage young women to do that.
Take advantage of the things that are in the community, like things that AWT does, from our perspective, what Girl Scouts does, and the other things that are there, just to try it. I think so many girls are just afraid to just try it. It's not, you're not making a life commitment,
Right.
Just try this thing and see if you like it at all. Thanks for that. And Jamesa, you're in a lot of future thinking kind of projects right now. So where do you see manufacturing going? And where do you think, in 10 years, 15 years, will be the hot button activities in manufacturing? How do people start preparing now?
So something that Nicole also works on is big topic now, additive manufacturing, so otherwise known as 3D printing. I think that's going to you're going to see a lot of exponential growth. I mean, it's already grown so much. We went from just doing the plastic, the 3D plastic pens and having the resin printers to now you're printing metal, and then pretty soon, if you get the processes right, we'll be able to 3D print ceramic materials. So I think additive manufacturing will continue to be something huge, like if you can make parts, near net shape. And they're even carrying that forward with projects that you have on other planetary bodies in this field of research called in situ resource utilization, where essentially if you can take the dirt that's on that planet, essentially mix it up into a concrete and print habitats or other tools you may need, that's going to be a huge help where you don't have to take as much stuff with you. And they're actually using that here on Earth to make more affordable housing in certain countries. So I think additive manufacturing will definitely continue to play a huge role.
Nicole, you want to add anything to that since that's kind of your wheelhouse?
Yeah, so I agree. I think additive has, especially as it progresses, because right now it's still being thought of as a new technology and trying to compare it with traditionally castings and stuff. So I think as people start really being able to accept that it's a new process with new opportunities, it can also help expedite a lot of timelines and a lot of the resource constraints that we typically have for a lot of different areas within manufacturing. So I think that additive, and then also with adding on to make things, more automated versus people actually pouring the castings and stuff. I think jobs are going to become a lot safer, but there's going to be a lot of jobs that we just don't even know are going to be needed yet, because as we start getting the technology, the more dangerous jobs in order to protect people, it's how to support those jobs and what those requirements are going to need, where I think a lot of opportunity is going to become. And that's the thing that's the most exciting about being up here on this panel is, you know, being able to be, you know, in a field where everything is so new. You get to make a big impact. So it's really changing a lot, and I think it's going to be amazing and have a lot of opportunities in the future.
I'd love to piggyback on that too. As a machining house that machines castings, it would be really great to have the ability to cut those timelines down and cut the cost down. And you know, during the pandemic, all of us struggled with resources and personnel and all of those. And when you're dealing with casting, you know, some of our castings take 52 weeks to get. And you can't, you know, as much as the customer asks you to expedite, well, we can't really do anything about it until we receive the castings in. And then if the castings come in and there's an issue or a defect or porosity or whatever it is, you're back to square one sometimes, and it's really hard to get, you know, especially customers who are, you know, they're people that are in the strategic sourcing area or realm. They don't understand, you know, the nuances of castings and why it takes so long and why, you know, they're so expensive. I mean, some of our castings have gone up 200%. And, you know, they're reminding us that we're that lovely customer that I dealt with, you know, 20 years ago. He'd be right knocking on my door, saying, you know, well, we have a contract that you signed in 2019 for this price. Well, you know, this is before the pandemic, and before, you know, who could have known that prices would go up? And I'm sure that there's plenty of your companies do the same thing. If you're locked in with this pricing, you have to figure out either a way to improve efficiencies or somehow cut the cost out of it, because nobody's paying for that increase. So, you know, I think that would be great if additive manufacturing eventually takes the role. I know I was just, when we were walking over to Fredon, we were talking about one of the casting houses called and said they're a couple weeks behind because people keep calling off because of the heat. And I mean, you're talking casting houses, heat treaters, and those are really, you know, it's a person problem, but it's a company problem now too, because, you know, you're having to kind of shuffle things around. So
hang on the microphone for a minute. I mean, price increases affect everything. You know, chocolate increased 2,500%, and so it's affecting Girl Scout cookies and their prices. But I'm sure as a leader, you're looking at your company and you have to be looking out 5 years at least, 10 years in a lot of cases. So give us a little bit of insight of how you make predictions for the future, because that's really what you got to do, right? And what you invest in and what you're looking at coming back on, what new businesses you're looking at courting. Like, how does that process work for you?
I think one of the ways that we look forward is investing in machinery and equipment every year. So every year we're buying at least $750,000 to $1 million worth of new equipment. If you sit and don't buy new technology or new machinery or things like that, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt when you're trying to go from here all the way up to here instead of from here to here. So, you know, I think that helps because, you know, machines are more efficient. They allow us to do more processes in the same machine, which cuts out a lot of handling stuff. You can't predict a pandemic. You can't predict a tsunami or, you know, whatever. All you can do is try and prepare as much as you can and know, okay, here's my goal, this is what we're going to do, and be able to pivot quickly. So if things are skyrocketing, you know, is your purchasing in line? You know, we go through our financials, and it's very interesting in the categories. You know, you go down, you're reporting, and from year to year, if you're percentage-wise within, you know, a couple percent of spend, whatever your dollars are, I mean, it's pretty interesting to see how consistent you can be. But we do a very good job at keeping those budgetary, you know, constraints and trying to make sure that we're buying things, you know, in the best way that we can and discount pricing and things like that. I think that one of the things that we all deal with is having skilled people. It's difficult to find people. Trying to remember to invest in the future by bringing in somebody who's just out of high school, or perhaps has gone through a work advance program, which is AWT's boot camp style intro manufacturing, and taking those individuals who, they have a great attitude, and they have an aptitude. I can deal with that, I can work with that, I can teach you anything. Now, on the flip side, if you're a brilliant programmer, but you have no good work ethic, you never show up on time, you don't care about your work, I can't do anything with that. So I'd rather, invest in the future by investing in people now and encouraging them to train, and we put people in apprenticeship and all of those things so that we have more skilled workers in the future. We don't have to worry about trying to hurry up and find them from somewhere.
Not just hoping that they'll come, and invest in people so that they'll be there.
Absolutely, you'd be surprised that people don't show up for an interview, or they take a job and then they don't show up on the first day. I don't understand this, but it's the world we're dealing with.
Right. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Jamesa, could you talk a little bit about important mentors or role models that helped you along the way, somebody who inspired you or gave you great advice?
So I always think back to my very first mentor I had at Glenn. I don't know if you can still hear me, but
Why don't you switch
my very first mentor, really all of my mentors I had for my NASA internships, because each of them were completely different. I was going in learning something completely new, but all three of them were very supportive and willing to help me learn this new skill to eventually get to where I was going. But I will say my very first mentor I had, Glenn, she retired during the pandemic, but she had worked there for over 40 years as a materials research engineer. And it was working on her project that, again, got me into material science. And she's someone that I still actually met up with her a few weeks ago. We had lunch, and I also call her and I still ask her advice for a project that once she retired, I actually took over that project for her. So being able to still reach out to her and ask for help has been super beneficial for me.
Do you mentor anybody?
I do. So I've had a couple of summer interns who I still keep in touch with, and then in my role, I'm fortunate enough I can also serve on graduate thesis committees. So my very first graduate student, the committee I served on, she defended her PhD in 2022. And then I have another graduate student currently who, fingers crossed, he's going to defend in either late August, early September. But actually just being able to do that, where I got my PhD 5 years ago, and being trusted to serve on thesis committees and letting, or having people acknowledge my expertise has also been really nice. And then also just being able to give back and then fostering that next generation of interns has been super cool.
There's another, but I just, if you have one more thing to ask you, how important do you think, I mean, you talk about getting this opportunity as a young woman to do this kind of mentoring, but I think that's super powerful to have a near peer, someone closer to your age, and I see that a lot with the young girls that are in our program, as opposed to maybe someone who's more accomplished and might be further down their career. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, or...
Yeah, I think it's also, so going along with what you're saying, is just seeing someone who's similar to you in a role that you potentially might want to be in the future. Because it's a problem that we're having at Glenn and also sort of across the agency. It's the reason why we're voted the best place to work in government, I think now 12 years in a row, that people really love working at Glenn, but because of that, they don't retire for a very long time, and so it's very hard to bring new people in all the time. Recently, we've gotten better at that, and I think that'll be super helpful moving forward. We're having, so past pandemic, we're now back to pre-pandemic intern numbers on center also. So seeing like new ideas coming in, these interns intern seeing these young employees working on super influential stuff is, I think, super important.
I think sometimes it seems more attainable when it's someone who's closer to your age than, you know, some oldster like me. It's like, okay, well, she's done all this stuff. Well, it doesn't matter. I was your age once too, but I think you can see it more clearly when it's somebody who's close to your age. Nicole, could you talk a little bit about maybe mentorship at your organization and what you do?
Absolutely. So I did a lot of mentorship also while I was in my PhD. I did a lot of recruiting for other graduate students in order to join the lab. I did a lot of recruiting with undergraduates looking for volunteering opportunities, and I also brought in a high school student, a couple of them, to help work on my research projects in order to get exposed to not only academia, but what it's like to actually be on a research project at school levels. And so it was a lot of, establishing expectations, outlining a project, if they needed help, making sure that they got the help, but also that they were able to be the ones who were leading the different areas, so that way they felt like they were actually making a contribution and just letting them know what the different areas of engineering that there are. And so at Lincoln, we do get interns, usually summer interns just with respect to college schedules, but sometimes they are in the fall and or spring as well. So currently I am working with, our department has 7 interns with about 40 employees, so we're slowly being taken over by interns. So currently my coworker and myself are working to mentor one intern about sensors and just a bunch of different areas on how we do our job and how making the robots more intelligent by adding sensors, which essentially give the robots more feedback in order to understand their environment and make more decisions on their own, or let us know, hey, something's going wrong on this print, you expect it to be at this height, but it's actually at this height. Just getting people more involved in order to see like what's going on and communicating your thought process and showing them that, it's just taking steps. And I wanted to add on a little bit to what you were saying about serving on thesis committees. It's especially important, in my opinion, for when you're mentoring and stuff, to try to put yourself in the student's shoes. So I think it's especially impactful that you're able to serve on those committees and help out, because you remember what it was like to be on the other side defending. And I feel like that's something that, with time in industry and stuff, that a lot of people forget what it's like to be in high school even. So it's okay if you have more than one mentor. In fact, as you grow and start taking different pathways, I think it is realistic to have more mentors and more people in your team. And that's why it's so important to really network, whether it's with peers or, just with the connections that you get with teachers or eventually professors.
I'm just curious, how many of those 40 interns are women?
The 40 employees, so there are 2 engineers, I being one of them, that are women in my group, and then there is 1 quality technician that is a woman, and I believe we have 4 operators, which are people who are out on the shop floor, just supporting the print, and supporting the robots, making sure everything goes smoothly, so.
But of your class of interns, how many women came in with that group?
There is 1 intern in the 7 interns that are women in additive right now, which I still think is a good number.
I think it's impressive to get any women into that field at that point, so kudos to you for having that. Jamesa, how important is it to have more women in manufacturing and STEM fields? What benefits do you kind of see when you have a more women-centric approach to things?
I think with anything, the more unique perspectives that you have, bringing new ideas to the table is always beneficial. When you tend to exclude a certain group of people, no matter who they are, you're basically cutting yourself off at the knees in terms of the innovation that you can bring about. So anyone, like of course we're here for women in STEM, but then also anyone else from other marginalized communities who can become involved, I think that's just going to be better overall.
I think that whole discussion talking about how diversity makes us stronger, building the STEM Center because it has an overall theme of nature-based innovations. We're looking a lot at nature, and when you look at natural systems like meadows or wooded areas or whatever, the more diverse they are, the stronger they are. Your lawn takes all kinds of extra chemicals and effort and everything because it's a monoculture, and it just doesn't survive very well. But when you naturally put together all the diversity, you have these very strong systems. And it's just something you wish people would understand too. So continuing on that conversation, I know
That was very profound.
Oh, thanks. That's what Girl Scouts do. So you're talking about the struggle of getting people into the industry. So now we're saying, you have to have diverse people too to have a strong workforce and everything. How does a smaller business like you compete and bring those folks in, and what efforts do you put forward in order to do that?
I think it's less of a campaign, if you will, of the larger companies have a certain department. Like we don't have a focus like that. We go out and we try and get the best people for the job, and we always have. Gender, whatever group you belong to, like you were saying, it doesn't matter. Everybody's bringing something to the table. So for us, we don't do it as structured as like a Lincoln Electric might, or the government agencies might. So maybe one of the other ladies can take a stab at this question.
So the way that we've been handling it recently is, so I've also had a chance to serve on interview committees, and one of the things that we tend to focus on is if there's a group of employees that you're interviewing and it comes down to say 2 employees where it's like, okay, they're both completely equal in terms of skill, experience, whatever, we're gonna go with the more diverse applicant because that's just what our focus is, as it should be. So it's a very straightforward approach from that standpoint. Now, sometimes you get, and this goes into increasing the pool of applicants, but again, starting it when they're in high school, encouraging them to go to college and study the fields that you want more diversity in, because you will get to a point, I sat on a committee where the best applicant was, and of course there's nothing wrong with this, but it was a Caucasian male, and my 2 other colleagues on that committee, they're like, okay, well, for sure, we're just gonna have to explain why these other diverse applicants weren't. And it was just a difference of skill for the specific position. So in that instance, it also goes back to, again, increasing that initial pool of applicants by encouraging underrepresented students to get into these fields that you need more diversity in. So eventually, when you get to the point where you have this interview committee where the pickings are slim, like you don't want that to be the issue, essentially. So yeah.
Is there anything that you've been doing, your organization's been doing, that you think is particularly effective? I mean, one of the things that we're talking about in Girl Scouts is this whole idea about math is for boys, not for girls, and all kinds of things for Girl Scouts very young, like 2nd grade, 3rd grade, things like that. So a lot of what we're doing is try to encourage to go, younger. You're all talking about college programs and high school programs. We need to go to middle school, I think, and elementary, and all these kinds of things. So we have enjoyed a lot of help from NASA in doing program. We have a program we're doing now called Stepping Stars, and one about Mars, and really talks to girls K through 5, K through 6, and gives them the confidence to say, I'm good at this. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, I don't know if you know much about some of the, we're doing a lot, NASA's doing a lot of elementary school work that I think is really powerful.
Yeah, so actually it's written in my job description and my duties, we're a core element, and it's written in everyone's. but a core element is doing outreach. And so I do get a chance to do different outreach events with elementary school girls, like doing science activities with them. A lot of our more structured stuff, like through the centers, of course, internships for as young as high school students, of course, all the way up through college, but there are plenty of opportunities to get involved with younger students as well.
I was reading a recent report that 23% of girls in elementary school say they're not smart enough for their dream job. That number jumps to 57% by the time you're in middle school. So efforts like you're doing, and to go in and tell people, yes, you know, there's no difference between you and the boys. In competency, it's confidence. And I think so many of the opportunities that you're making available make such a difference in people's lives. But they will point back at that's the moment when I knew I could do it, right? Talking about hands-on experiences, were any things that you did earlier? You talked about your model building, I love that story. Some other kinds of things in the AWT robotics, talk about those experiences.
Yeah, so a lot of my hands-on experiences, so I was the typical garage mechanic working with her dad. You know, we would get a bunch of cars, and then when I got old enough where I could drive mopeds, we ordered a bunch of broken down mopeds from eBay and scavenged parts, and then started flipping them, and I kept 3. And then when it got time for me to drive, we sold all the mopeds, fixed up some cars. So I've been working on cars a lot throughout my time, also helping my parents fix up the house. So if you're interested in working with your hands, definitely see if your parents need help with anything, or like you were talking about with the art and stuff. Art is more than just drawing and painting. There's a lot of different things that you can do. In fact, I was crocheting when I was really young with my grandmother.
I know how to crochet. My great aunt taught me.
I
love crocheting.
So if you want to actually work with your hands, building up the hand-eye coordination is a huge skill and is typically more of a skill with women. So being able to have the fine-tooth motor control, especially with working on small-scale robots, like I was building crab robots for my PhD, so we were working with micro servos, which is basically just micro muscles for robots, so you can move the legs and they can walk. So more hands-on things. A lot of my cousins and just kids of family friends have expressed interest to me because they know that I work on robots and stuff. So I started even going to Target, and there's a bunch of like learn how to code Frozen edition, where you can like get Elsa powers on an iPad. So even just looking at what's available at stores, or Lego Mindstorm has incredible kits in order to learn how to build robots, how to program the robots, and actually start using them. So even if you can't find something that is a full-on club or after-school activity or something, there is a lot, especially even on YouTube, like just looking up how to do a couple of different things. And there's a lot of free tools that you can use in your belt, or even just engineering doesn't necessarily have to be you doing math or you doing science or you programming on a computer. I mean, a lot of engineering skills are built around even just playing with Legos. So just understanding how things come together, how like cause and effect reactions, playing with a science kit, cooking. I mean, cooking is a huge one, and I constantly use that as a way to explain, like, you know, if you don't have enough rising, you're going to get really flat cookies. I mean, that's chemistry. I mean, so math and science is hiding everywhere, and I think that people are trying to put engineering. I still don't even know what engineers do, and I'm a doctor of engineering. I mean, it can really be anything that you want it to be. It's just how you look at a problem and go about finding a solution.
I kind of love this question. So if Alyson and Jamesa, if you could both kind of answer it as well. So those hands-on experiences you had in your younger years, you think drove you to this kind of career?
I think that I would like to answer it in a different way, if you don't mind. It's the offering hands-on experiences. You know, coming up when we were doing, we had an Explorer post, and we were one of the only manufacturing explorer posts in this area. And that was for young boys and girls, high school age, and then they would learn basic blueprint reading and assembly and that kind of thing, and end up with their own cannon at the end. And then when we decided to, we'd get a handful of students one year, we'd get 20-something the next year, we thought, well, why don't we replicate this and have other companies doing it? Because you bring the kids in your facility, they're working with your classy machinists, and they're seeing what else you're doing. So they see all the products you're making, and it's backdooring of a lot of information while they're having fun on a different project. So that's when we started the robots competition, and we saw my dad went into Arizona, I believe it was, and saw a similar competition and said, that's it. That's the spark, pun intended, that we need to get the kids interested. And then, we always say that the competition itself is, in our minds, irrelevant, because it's what they've learned this entire time and the skills that they have acquired throughout their experience, and the camaraderie and the friendships with the manufacturing company. And it's not such a scary, interesting, unknown place to them anymore. They can talk to their friends and explain, what happens in that brick building and that brick building, and so I think having being able to offer opportunities like that to boys and girls, and whatever age. I think since we have our new staff member Monica, who's well versed in the younger grades and likes the younger grades, I think we're going to try and come up with some things for kindergarten, first grade age, because you talked about having to reach them when they're young. Now we go in at third grade. UWT's youngest age right now is about third grade, so we're trying to dial back a little bit. So we will be giving you a call and asking for some ideas.
So I'm actually going to take this and relate it to my artwork that I do. So like I said, growing up, art is my natural talent, and I mostly do collage and mixed media, which is very much like Nicole was saying, finding things, even dissimilar things, and seeing how they mesh together. That's actually something that it really interests me, and it gets me really excited. That's why I still do it to this day. Also, if you ever go up to Lakeland Community College, I have a piece there on display. I'm super proud of it. But so like Nicole was saying, just learning how to think in different ways and see how things come together, I think that is really the most important thing when you're considering being a scientist or engineer, and you're responsible for coming up with new discoveries that are ultimately going to help people, because that's what we're ultimately here for. We want to help people, we want to make cool things that are going to accomplish that goal. And really it's training your mind to think in different ways and come up with new things. So.
That's great. Your comments about crocheting made me think about when we, 2018, when we got a lot of new Girl Scout badges, there was a whole series on coding, and a lot of the troop leaders were really panicked, saying, my girls want to earn this badge, and I don't know anything about that. I am not, that kind of a person. So we had a little workshop, and we were teaching them about it. There was one woman who was just listening very intently, and she just seemed very frustrated and everything, and then all of a sudden, she just had this look on her face of discovery, and she goes, oh my gosh, this is just like a pattern I crochet, and that's what coding is. And so she did her whole presentation with the girls and everything all around using crocheting as an example and talking about how it's not intimidating, and she became one of our best supporters for some of those badges when she was a very reluctant participant in the beginning. Are there any STEM activities that when you're working with younger people or that are fun that you might recommend for high school age students to try?
Lego Mindstorm. 10 out of 10. We actually,
I will probably give feedback if I
to-
come up
sorry.
to you.
So actually in my robotics class in college, we got Lego Mindstorm kits and just started programming it to do a bunch of things. Like one of them was draw out O and U using this robot. Because I went to Ohio Northern University, you do not understand how challenging it is to write with the robot. Where, like you have to really start thinking outside of the box. So people started like programming it so that way, because there's an offset of where you attach the marker versus where the robot's driving. And so a lot of people were struggling with this offset, struggling with it. And my group, I took the marker out of the marker and attached it to the middle of the robot, so we didn't have to worry about that. So it's just all about like being creative and playing with the robots. So like I said, with the Lego Mindstorm, they have a couple of different instructions, just like Legos always do. And so you can follow those or even go on YouTube or even add on different things. There's also a lot of great over-the-counter robot kits that, I mean, just because that's what the robots are, I mean, you can start off by building them originally, but for my PhD work, we started it off by buying an over-the-counter hexapod, which is a 6-legged robot, and modifying that to become the crab robot that was shown in this presentation earlier. So that was the first step of me designing an entire line of robots that were used in the shorelines that are going in and out of the water. So the over-the-counter robot was not waterproof. It didn't have all of the sensors that I needed. It had some extra ones that I didn't, so I took them off, but it's all about looking at what's out there. And then, like I said before, I was looking for some coding projects to get some little kids interested in, which isn't really the right age range, but just go and see what's in Target or Walmart. I mean, you could be very pleasantly surprised. Like, I found how to program the Force with Star Wars and how to program Elsa's ice powers. And then if you're closer to the Robobots age, especially like middle school, but more so high school, going to Micro Center and just asking about generic controls and stuff, or just buying a Raspberry Pi, which is a computer that's about this big, and learning how to play with it. I mean, that's what controlled all of my robots. So there's a lot of different ways. Like, I even bought a Raspberry Pi kit that let me program an old school Atari. So I have an Atari that's this big. And for those of you who don't know what an Atari is, think of it as a very, very limited, like, Xbox or PlayStation. So there are a lot of tools. It's just a matter of finding it out. And if you're someone who doesn't really like talking to people to find out about it, Google is a wonderful tool. So you can look up, what can I do if I want to play with coding, or what can I do if I want this? Or if you're interested in learning how to solder or anything, I bought a kit to make my dad a handheld Tetris that he still plays. So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. You just have to go and look.
Anybody have any burning thoughts they want to mention?
Go on, Nancy. I mean, clearly you all have a lot of enthusiasm for your job, but we all have lives too. So let me give this to all of you. How do you balance that career with your personal life? What are your favorite tips for making sure that you don't burn out on one side or the other?
So my favorite hobby is not my husband's favorite hobby of mine, and I like rescuing animals. So my husband and I recently started fostering kittens through our favorite cat rescue, and then we have rescued 2 dogs, 3 cats, a bearded dragon. We have an axolotl coming. I really like gardening, so but the deer kept eating that, so I have a couple of aquariums now. Love reading, love video games, love being a nerd, going on walks, just helping my friends meet their goals. Like, my husband's currently training for a triathlon, which is insane. But I love that for him, but only for him. So it's just finding ways to, keep busy. I also bake a lot, which my coworkers love. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to.
So I'm going to first go back to what I said earlier. Part of keeping a good work-life balance is, again, learning how to say no. And so just piggybacking off what you said, you know, things I like to do. Again, I love art. I love cooking and baking also. Really good stress reliever. I also love, I also know how to sew in addition to knowing how to crochet, so I do make some of my own clothes. And also there's a lot of math and engineering that goes into sewing too, so if you've never thought that, you should, look at a sewing pattern and it can be the most confusing thing you've ever seen in your life. And then I love working out. I'm a member of a CrossFit gym, so just staying healthy, that's a huge stress reliever. And I love traveling. So tomorrow I get to go to a conference in London for work, so work's paying for it, so that's fantastic. I don't have to worry about it. So that's a little bit of what I like to do.
I think it's the hardest thing is to learn how to leave the office when you need to leave the office and not do one more thing, and have that pressure, you know. If you know you need to get out at a certain time, own that and plan for it, and you work a little harder, maybe a little longer than the previous day or next day, but not to have any kind of guilt about leaving and going to do something for yourself or, you know, with your kids or, you know, what have you. It's very easy to get caught up in the routine of working, getting home, working again, getting home, doing your laundry and this other stuff that needs to be taken care of. And then I remember, my ex-husband would always say that I was like a serial volunteer because I would volunteer for everything. And even if I didn't want to volunteer, somebody would volunteer me for it. So, I mean, I was like crazy busy, and even that stuff, that's hard to say no to too. But it's okay, and we can say no, we can prioritize going and enjoying a beautiful day and, you know, hanging out with your friends or working on whatever it is that you're passionate about or doing a puzzle or watching true crime. Maybe that's just me.
And then just to kind of add on and combine both of your points, because I think that they're very important, is especially with this topic of work-life balance, because it's so easy for the balance to be disrupted, but not only like clearly communicating your boundaries, but if you clearly communicate them, actually following through. The best advice that I was ever given with respect to this, I don't remember where it was from, it could even be from a TV show, but is think about being a friend to yourself. So if you're always breaking promises to yourself, saying like, oh yeah, after dinner I'm gonna go on a run, and be like, I can go on the run tomorrow. Or after this meeting, I'm done because I have to go and get ready for my trip tomorrow. I mean, it's just really making sure if you're always a flake on you, you're not gonna wanna be your friend. So it's just a lot of thinking it through, like, not only are you a person, but you have to think of yourself as a friend, and you can't be a bad friend to yourself. Otherwise, it's gonna affect you in all other areas of your life.
Thanks. This has been great. I really have enjoyed my time, and I'm going to give each of you a chance to do any kind of parting words that you want to do on this panel. So we'll start down with you, Alyson.
Oh, geez.
Just anything you think maybe that didn't come up in the conversation.
I think that, you know, what I would share with young women is to give yourself a break sometimes. If you fail a test or you're failing in a class, that doesn't make you a failure, and it doesn't mean you won't get another try. Just because you're not academically strong doesn't mean you can't go into manufacturing or engineering. Maybe you just haven't found a passion that connects you to make it meaningful for you in order to be successful at it. I've never asked somebody in an interview what their GPA is. I've just never done it. I really don't care. A lot of people really stress out about that. Like, how am I going to explain this 2.0 or 2.5 or, you know, work on your character, which is more important. Work on who you are. Everything else will fall in line, but at the end of the day, it's what's inside that makes you successful.
So to piggyback off your point about finding what you're passionate about that connects you, We often have students ask us, oh, I want to go into STEM. What classes should I take? What should I study? Well, the first part of this, I'll say that we are looking for people who are well-rounded individuals. Like, of course, if you have a passion for science, engineering, math, that's great, if that's what you want to go into. But ultimately, leading back to what I was saying, a diversity of perspectives, that also means for yourself, like if you've only ever known science or engineering, then how are you going to have that outside thought, that idea, that spark that's really going to lead to innovation? So if you love music, take that music class. We have a Glen band that plays, like, it's employees that know how to play an instrument that will play at all of our different picnics and stuff. We have sports leagues on center. Like, if you want to play a sport, like, you should do it. Several people, a bunch of my coworkers are also artists and like woodworkers, ceramicists, all of that. And then the second part of that is, I know that we're focusing on, if you want to be a science major, engineering major, but to piggyback off again, finding your passion. That, say if you get into a science or engineering class and you're like, okay, I found out, hey, I'm actually not good at this, or I don't like it. And that's, again, up to you to decide when you're in that class and you decide that. No one else can tell you that. But what we do is not only just being in a lab, being scientists or engineers. We need people who know how to manage money, to look at our finances. We need legal people to tell us, hey, don't talk about that invention until you have a patent on it first. We need business people to write our contracts. We need public relations and public affairs people to help us communicate our science. We need writers to write up all of our different information that we send out. We need graphics people. We need artists to draw all of our cool posters and everything. We need more than just scientists or engineers to complete the mission. So if I were to end with anything is, again, going back to, even if you're like, I know for certain I don't want to be a scientist or engineer, but if you still love science and want to have an impact on it, there are other ways, other things that you're passionate about that you can definitely influence where science and engineering is going in the future.
And to continue the piggyback, that is actually one of my biggest pet peeves with engineering, is thinking that you're in this alone. You will never be the only person signing off on a drawing or making a call or something. You work as a team. So even if it's always a collaborative effort. I mean, you're never alone. And if you don't know something, it doesn't mean you can't go ask for help. And just kind of to add on to that, because this is something that I struggled with a lot in college and then even more in grad school, because I was one of the students, like I said, I was very well-rounded. I loved art, I loved math, I loved science, I loved history, I loved English. I had no idea what I wanted to do. But when I got into college, classes got harder, and I must have been doing something wrong, because I never had issues like this at school. And then when I got to grad school, it got even harder, so I knew I had to be doing something wrong. But do you know why you go to school? It's to learn. If you went there knowing everything already, then that would just be a waste of your time, and if it's in college, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So just remember that even if you think you're bad at math or you think you're bad at science, just keep on going, because you're there to learn. And just because you don't get it right away, you're not gonna get everything right away. You're gonna struggle on some areas. I struggle on some areas, but don't be afraid to ask for help. Remember you have friends there, and that together you're gonna be a team. Even when you graduate and you're working in real life, you're still gonna be on a team. You're never gonna be alone. And tests are stupid. Google is always there. Don't let a bad test grade hold you back or tell you that you can't do something. If I let bad test grades hold me back, I wouldn't be sitting up here today.
I won't. Did everybody got it? Okay. Yes. So I lost track of that. Sorry, I was paying attention to the page. So thanks everybody for participating today. I really enjoyed it. I hope everybody else did as well. And we appreciate AWT for hosting today and SME for helping out.